let's do some introductions. Dustin, where are you from? What is your experience? Why are you passionate about tariffs?
I'm in Laguna Beach, California, and I've been in the manufacturing space of predominantly sporting goods for the last 23, 24 years. Our manufacturing overseas and with a lot of manufacturing in China, the tariffs, they have us all by the ear, by the nose, and by every other part you can grab and toss around. So we're just trying to figure out how to navigate around these and share some of the tips and tricks that we've learned in our experience over the years and that we've gained through the wisdom of those experiences.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And then Darin, I'm sure most everybody knows who you are, but can you introduce yourself real fast? 30 plus years, decades.
Started sourcing in China in 1989, bumped my shin on a lot of opportunities and cut my teeth in business in China formally. It's been a great ride. A lot of focus on China trade. My degree is in ancient Mandarin. Went to school at Nanjing University. I read, write, speak legal engineering documents, whatever it needs to be to get the job done. Unfortunately, I've done some work in some of the same areas that Dustin's in. We have a little bit of overlap in field of geography of specialty. I come with a China focus and global trade focus. I also have a factory in Guatemala and a developing mechanized factory that will allow us to do sub-assemblies and work on digital devices instead of just garments. So right now we have a garment factory down there that's capable of about 500,000 garments per month. And we brought that over from China in 2019 because we felt the difficulties were just becoming insurmountable in China production. And we needed to offer an alternative hemisphere solution for most of our clients that were in the textile arena. So in that space.
Just FYI for people, Darin's Chinese is excellent.
Not anymore. I haven't been back to
really good. So I speak Chinese, and I'll just say there's levels to this. And Darin is, top level of Chinese. Just if you guys wanted to know.
I did call a taxi driver once, and when he showed up to pick me up, he said, "I'm looking for Mr. Long." And I said, "That's me." He said, "No, I'm looking for a Chinese guy named Mr. Long." And that was when my wife really thought, okay, I married the right guy.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, let's go ahead and kick this off. We have a couple questions planned, so let's get into that. So kick us off, Darin. Let's do a quick recap for those who weren't here last time. Catch us up. What happened with Section 301, the de minimis rules, what's going on with tariffs? Give us the 1,000-foot overview.
All right, Dustin, you can hop in here if I get something incorrect. 301s, pretty much, they didn't change except they just expanded. The de minimis rules, if you're shipping anything into the United States from any country in the world under de minimis, you're basically avoiding any duty and tariff rates, $800 or less. And if you're favored by that, the drop ship model for basically Shein or Temu, or if you drop ship from Shein or Temu or anyone else out of China or other countries, in China and Hong Kong, that opportunity shuts off on May 2nd. You will not have any opportunity to ship under that de minimis rule, which allows you to bypass any duty or tariff. Then it will go to 30% of the rate, Jared, and then or $50 or something like that. You know what? It's going to vacillate a little bit. But what Dustin and I have already noticed is that those sorts of shipments are already backing up in Hong Kong.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're just not shipping those. We used to ship our samples under de minimis, but they're not shipping samples under de minimis anymore out of Hong Kong.
Just to add to the 301 detail is, Section 301 really started hitting the manufacturing scene in 2018. Late 2018, it started getting employed. And it's a 25%. It's on certain categories. So when you look at the 125 plus the 20 fentanyl tariff plus your base duty, you get to add Section 301 if it is applicable to your category. It's another measure that was there to protect globalization and protect the American manufacturing aspect. And most of us have absorbed it and learned how to operate within the confines of it the last 6-7 years. But now you have all these other tolerance stacks with the duties to add on top. And that's where 301 comes in as a little extra fluff that we'd all love to see eliminated.
Well, but before we move on, I don't want to do too much of a side tangent on this, but there's been a TikTok trend recently where the manufacturers... Yeah, Darin's dancing on TikTok again. It's I'm just kidding. No, there's been a TikTok trend where factories are posting their big name brands. This is my cost. Come and buy it. What is this in retaliation of? Why is this a trend right now?
I love it. Guerrilla warfare. a lot of the Chinese are told, and Dustin's heard this too, guys, you're going to need to cut your margin because of these tariffs. You're going to have to pin your margin has got to go down. There isn't anything to give. That was all massaged out under the 301s. Dustin seen the same thing. And now it's like, oh, shoot, there's 100 and some odd % tariff or 30%. You guys are going to need to take bear half of that burden. Well, the factories are like, I can't bear any of that burden. You're the one that's going to be marking things up and adding to a Birkin bag, $30,000 onto the markup on a Birkin bag or anything else, a high brand. No, even Nike shoes, they know that it's $10 a pair, right?
Yep.
So that's basically another $10, but Nike's going to mark it up, what, $100, $200 to the consumer? And I think the Chinese were like, we've had enough of that pushback on the duties. We're just going to go straight to TikTok and we're going to give them our address. And I've called a couple of them. They're real. Those are real.
Wow.
It's not a stunt. It's not a media stunt.
That is insane.
Just to lean in on that a little bit quickly, is if you go back and you look at the Section 301 that was applicable to the categories starting at the end of 2018, most brands, manufacturers started moving out of China because of this additional 25%. So when you look at the 10-year over the last 6-7 years, the move and the exodus from China has been due to that additional 25% because it's quite a bit. It's hefty. So when you look at last year, 2024, I believe the facts state that about 39% of manufacturers moved a portion of their goods away from China. Right? That's pretty significant. That's pre all this extra tariff and duty, and even before we knew which administration would take over. But people have been very motivated to get out of China because of Section 301. And now where do we sit?
This is a great lead into our next question. This is something I want to discuss with all of you. How can I quickly calculate my total duty stack under the new rules? Meaning, like, what is the actual impact? How do I calculate that? So I'll let either one of you start this, but you guys are experts on this.
Yeah, Dustin, segue in there.
Sure. Well, here's where it will go. I'll kind of work backwards. We're at 125 based on liberation tax. Okay. Then we've got a 10% tax that was instituted on February 4th for fentanyl, and then again another 10% that was instituted on March 4th for fentanyl. That's a cumulative of 145% based on new administration add-ons. So you take that 145% tariff, and then if your category is applicable to Section 301, you're going to add in 301. If it's not, then you obviously omit it. Then you have your base duty. So it's the current liberation plus fentanyl tariff plus Section 301 plus base.
Dustin and I put together a calculator. You may have already received it from one of our earlier free offerings. We'll send it out to you as well. That allows you to see the full tariff and duty stack in a spreadsheet. You can put in your own HTS-US code along with your own commodity number and the base duty, and that helps calculate what you're facing. Now, some of you, if you're producing in other countries, you've got a 90-day reprieve. The little spreadsheet helps kind of mitigate that, so you can pull that out and still see exactly what your stack is going to be right now versus what it looks like it could be 90 days from now. And things are going to change, right? If we know anything about President Trump and the way he handles folks in this sort of theater, it's shock, awe, and okay, let's see what we can come to an agreement on.
By the way, what products right now, and generally speaking, what industries and specific products have been affected the most?
Whoa, which ones haven't? Would be what do you think, Dustin? Which ones have they all been touched? They've all been hit, right?
I mean, everything except if it's sensitive to manufacturing for pharmaceuticals, military defense, or some other materials that the countries largely dependent on. Those will sit on a list that is currently duty-free from any country in the nation. It's a big list, but it's limited, and it really breaks down to kind of chemical components and ingredients.
Got it.
That's right. Active ingredients for medicines. We saw the whole broad category of vaccines on that list last week or this week. It tends to update weekly, right, Dustin?
Yeah, correct.
But active ingredients for medications, vaccines is a broad range in itself. We also saw, interestingly enough, building materials, which I think reflects the current administration's interest in making sure that hit communities, people wanting to build a house without having these huge tariffs. That sort of stuff is being moved away. So those that are building homes right now or have planned to build homes, they're not going to be hit with some of these high duties and tariffs. I appreciated seeing the list. It seemed to be quite curated.
Let's pivot now into some real strategy. Let's get tactical. So say I'm a brand. I've been hit with these tariffs, and I'm manufacturing out of China, or I have historically. Is it really worth moving production out of China? And how do you know when the time is right? Like, walk us through the calculus that you guys do to make that decision.
I have one quick segue into that, and Dustin, then you can take this. So when is the right time? As before, it was actually a few months ago. It was actually a few years ago for you to begin marginally moving out and preparing for this. But I want you to know I have a new client who produces shirts. He decided to weather the storm in China, kept all of his production in China. And then I get a call 72 hours ago, and it was, holy cow, my product got out a day late. I can already see what my duty and tariff penalty, he called it a penalty, is going to be. He goes, I have to move now. Darin, I need you to provide me a 60-day time and action, TIA or TNA, for me to completely move all of my production, 150,000 garments a month, out of China to Guatemala. So I haven't shaved for a couple of days. and it's these sorts of experiences help us understand and relens what the reality of the world is that we're working in right now. This is a real impact on this family business. It's a small family business, but it's still a family business that supports a lot of people in the United States. Well, that's one example. Dustin's got others. How does it affect? What's the effect? How do you roll out of a region? How do you roll out of China? Dustin, what would your input on this be?
I think it's a good point. What you really kind of illuminated in is us small business owners. We employ 70% of this country, but we're the ones taking the biggest brunt of the hit. You got Apple and Tim Cook now asking for relief because they're going to lose billions, but they're the ones. It's a massive corporation, but the little guys who employ the majority of the country, who are the majority getting hit by this and hurt by this, are the ones losing. A good example is, we're shipping in a large volume batch of keychains. It's a low cost item. When you add the tariff to it, it's astronomical. Let's take it's a $30,000 cost product. There's an $79,000 tariff fee on top.
Oh my goodness.
Who loses that, right? That's going into 6,200 retail doors. Well, the retailer's like, I'm out of stock and I need something on the shelf. So we're seeing cases where bottom lines are being bled dry of any sort of margin that was to be made, and everybody's looking for somebody else to pay for it. That's the hardest part.
Okay, so tactically, you're in China. You need to transfer out, maybe to Guatemala, Mexico, wherever. You guys have a calculator on the effects of duties and tariffs. Let's talk about what are the countries that you guys are looking towards that are the fastest and the lowest risk? Because we still don't know how this is going to unravel. We don't know which countries are and aren't safe. How are you guys thinking about that? Which countries?
Well, first and foremost, Dustin and I had a discussion on this yesterday. He and I have deep experience in Central and South China and Southeast Asia. And one of the first things you want to look at is your labor mobility, and you want to look at the infrastructure. For example, if you have a picture frame and you know that you need to move that out of China right now, you don't immediately go to Vietnam. You actually want to go to countries that haven't subsisted on providing feedstock for China. You want to go to someone like Indonesia.
Wait, break that down. What do you mean by that? Feedstock from China. So just like a pass-through to...
Yes, there's a lot of pass-through business that goes to Vietnam that's not necessarily mature. They've relied on Chinese assets to complete everything that they're doing. What you find in Indonesia is a very mature manufacturing base, just like you would in Thailand. They have not grown up on the skirt tails, so to speak, of China. So you're going to find access just for an example, this picture frame, you're going to find access to a 6,000 person factory with mature infrastructure and equipment that cost them millions of dollars to buy, let alone install. And you can simply take your production needs from China and replace them right into a current manufacturing line. That might take you less than 30 days of transition and very small amounts of money. But you first look at the infrastructure, you look at the right factors of mobility, if they have the right amount of labor, if they're already in place. But those are some of the critical things we look for first, is infrastructure, manufacturing capacity, labor.
Dustin, what are some of the promising countries that you see?
Well, we started making shifts into Vietnam early last year, and that's been a good move. The Vietnamese are very capable, but there's been a significant amount of investment into the factories. And in the textile industry, there's been mills that have been stood up. So what you have to consider when you're looking at these countries is not only are they capable to manage the factories and the facilities and have the labor staff available, do they have access to raw materials? And that's what nobody can touch when it comes to China. China has, hands down, the world's best access to raw materials and trims and the types of things that give us the products that we're very used to and accustomed to, and the innovations I've really gone into. So when you go to some of the third world countries and they have labor rates and they're hungry for business, they want to do the best job possible, but it now costs an absorbent amount of money to export the raw materials from countries like Taiwan or Korea, Vietnam, China, and then import them to those other nations. So you have freight, you have all kinds of variable labor rates inside there that end up stacking on top. So you really do need to consider not only the quality of the culture wherever you want to manufacture, but their attention to detail and then the raw materials.
Okay. Well, other than Indonesia, and obviously Vietnam, like what other countries are you guys looking towards? Particularly, maybe like in South America, Latin America, anything promising there?
Oh, there's still going to be a considerable amount of shift into the Southeast Asian region. Dustin sees it too. There's people asking and saying, hey, I'm going to go into Bangladesh. I'm going to go into other low-cost and labor-intensive products being brought into those low-cost, labor-intensive areas. And they also see Bangladesh as being kind of favored in this U.S. trade impact. They realize there's a different impact there than there is in China. But I see and I feel a huge amount of pressure to move products, specifically textiles, but also medical goods, as well as automated devices being brought into Guatemala. In fact, half of the calls I received over the past week have been, Darin, what is the infrastructure in Guatemala? Can I bring something in for you to work on subassembling for? What's the plastic injection? What's the mold fee costs? What's our cycle time to make a mold and bring it up from testing into full production mode? And do you have enough square feet in your factory? They go right into, they're not qualifying me. It's how fast can you bring it up? Those sorts of moves are a little bit scary for me, but I have no idea and concept of the fear they're facing right now with raw materials, product on the water, and realizing they have to pivot within 90 days, or they're priced out of many of the segments that they're priced into now. So Central and South America, I see huge. Mexico, there's a lot of foreign direct investment there, specifically from China. So they're taking some different scrutiny than other countries are because of Chinese investment in Mexico.
So I want to get to some of the questions. All right, we have first question. This is from Dimitri. Dimitri, this is...
Hey, Dimitri.
Yeah, he asked a bunch last time. Yeah, so this is... Okay, Darin, on the last call, you talked about the government cracking down on assembly. If we take footwear as an example, if I'm sending a China-made upper and outsole to be glued together in Cambodia, is this at risk of being tariffed? And if not immediately, is this a real risk in the middle long term?
Dimitri, we're going to drop a bomb right here because I think Dustin has got some cool stuff that just happened to him recently that leads into this. Dustin, would you share us what happened with you?
This is where we need to be careful with shifting, I guess, if you will. You know, there's a true country of origin for a product, but I think what you're also going to see there, Dimitri, is there's the potential for fractional tariffs, right? It's happening in the EU market. So they're much more rigid about looking at where the raw materials came from in the supply chain. And if a certain portion of it came from a certain country and there's a tariff on that country, well, then they'll use a fractional tariff to have some revenue and some counter backlash. So nobody knows what's really going to happen there when it comes to the U.S. The U.S. does end up following a lot of suits that the European Union does. Like, you know, European Union started banning chemicals long before the U.S. has, and it follows suit. It just becomes a global normal after a certain case. And you know what I think with Darin, what you're relating to is, you know, there's there's ways to shift. If you ship something from China to Malaysia and didn't do enough value add to it and you change the country of origin, that's not a legitimized change. So you have to be very, very careful about your manufacturing and assembly and what that does to your product. Does it change your code, your harmonized tariff code? Does it change your product entirely?
Dustin, I don't mean to draw you out on this, but didn't somebody solicit your business by sending you an email about relabeling product out of China?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I said, hey, I've got a solution. We can just ship everything to Malaysia and change the COO tag. I said, absolutely not. Lose my number. You have to be really careful. People are trying to come up with creative and clever ways to get around this, but we have to be above board, 100%.
Darin, you were talking about a hat example.
Yes.
Can you give that for us?
Okay, and Dimitri, this folds into that question of yours. So, and it extends from what Dustin said. I had 2 hours worth of phone call with one of my my trusted import-export attorney, Ruth, and she's on my. I can send this out to everybody so they'll know who Ruth is. She actually trains customs brokers, and got over 1,000 of them trained in the United States. At any rate, what Ruth explained to me was just what Dustin said. If you bring individual components like a hat, a ball hat, we were doing a little bit of a research, Dustin and I, in fact. If you bring in the bill and you bring in the cap, can you bring that in as subcomponents and then complete the assembly in another offshore location that has tariff or duty relief or lower tariff or duty? The answer is no. Why? Is because one of the commodity classifications for a cap is also a hat. It is not a large enough shift to show that you're taking raw material, shifting it across multiple commodities numbers or rules, so it has a completely different code at the end. Now, let's take a look at another product, and that would be a digital mechanical device or a shoe. Can you bring a sole in and have it not in the tariff classification of footwear? Or an upper for a shoe already previously formed and bring it into another location or domicile and not have it classified under a tariff classification of a footwear article? The answer is probably not. So those sorts of shifts would probably not pass the litmus test of the CBP. Okay. Now, CBP. However, let's look at a digital device that controls mechanized options and it's got wheels or pulleys or whatever. Those digital control components, along with the internal mechanical, whether they're pneumatic or hydraulic, those could be used in a wide variety of devices. I'm bringing them in specific for one assembly, yes, but I'm bringing them in and they can be used for multiple assemblies. In this case, they would pass the litmus test for CBP because I'm bringing in a hydraulic device, putting it into another device that's digitally controlled with a digital controller that can be used across multiple categories, putting it into a unique construct or box, and now it is a completely different commodity with a completely different HTSUS code. So that is the right sort of a shift. I fear that in footwear, like in hatwear, that you may not be able to see enough shift. Now, I'm going to add a different layer here real quick, and then we can go on where Jared wants us to go, which is other cool stuff, and drop another bomb probably. And that is that some of these other countries are not viewed the way the U.S. and Central and South America are. We are looked at with a great deal more scrutiny than people out of Southeast Asia. They don't always track source or origin of your subcomponents. Do I think they're going to go there? Yes, because I've been told that I need to prepare all of my traceability documents for future shipments in the United States. Is there a window of time right now where those sorts of traceability documents are not going to be surveyed or reviewed in Cambodia or Vietnam? Quite likely, because I don't think they're going to track them until the system is ready. But so do you have a window? I think you probably do. Do you need to be prepared to shift more measurably outside of that region? Probably. Dimitri, I hope that answered your question.
He says, bummer.
I'm sorry, dude. I'm so sorry. We're all sweating it.
So let me move on to the next question, and then we'll dive into some of our prepped questions. This is from Andrew Musgrove. What is the date of the new tariffs change from China? And does that go into effect when the goods leave the origin country or when they arrive in the United States?
The first thing I'll say is I think Dustin may have boned up on this better than I did, because I just had that client of mine say that he already received his notice of what his duty and tariff was going to be, and he shipped within 1 day of whatever the measurement date was going to be. And I've even asked him, he goes, I don't know, Darin, I don't know. I'm just shocked. I need to change. Let's just focus on moving forward. So there are people already receiving notice of their 125% Liberation Day duty and tariff amounts. Why they're coming through so fast, I don't know. But the response was rapid fast. Now, you have the 90-day reprieve, and Dustin, where does that extend to? If you're aware of that, when does that 90-day reprieve extend to? Was it from the date of the statement, or was it from the date of the issue of the Liberation Day tariff and duty?
I believe that lists on July 9th.
So July 9th, and if anything I've ever learned from Dustin, if he tells you, it's like gospel truth there. So July 9th, now, could that be moved up or could it be moved back? I've actually heard Trump say that we might extend it, we might not, and so we'll see what happens, but July 9th.
Something we didn't hit there that I think is important is every product in the world that comes into the United States of America has a minimum of 10% increase. Everything. Because that's the universal tariff. So no matter what happens or the relief we hear, we still today can expect a 10% increase on the goods that we purchase. And that's likely to hit our pocketbooks by June or July.
We have Jennifer Eaton saying so. She said that is not from China. They're happening now. The reprieve is not on China, to my understanding.
That's correct. China did not get any relief. 90 countries that were on the 70 or 80 countries that were on the reciprocal tariff, they all got reprieve back to the universal tariff.
That's right. China didn't get the reprieve. He thought he got his stuff out 1 day earlier than he thought he did, but the documents showed 1 day later than he thought. And that's why he got hit.
Before we move on, because I know everybody watching here, like they want tactical lists. So I'm gonna push you guys on it one more time. Between both of you, like rapid fire, give us the country, like just list out the countries in Southeast Asia and Latin America that, from like in your experience or other people's experience, they have decent infrastructure for raw materials. They have decent sized factories that can have good machinery. Just rapid fire, like which ones are the best?
Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh. Those are going to be probably some of the top places to go in Southeast Asia.
I agree. And I agree with Dustin. I think you're going to see them sign direct trade relations with the United States sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And the fact that the opportunity for them to have their current, whatever, 30 or 40% Liberation Day duty and tariff laid on, I see those coming down drastically. But I agree with Dustin. I don't think you're going to see the universal tariff pulled up. Sourcing's
no longer just about price. Right now, we have to play and look at where does a country or nation's political positioning stand? How do we pivot and speed to market with those nations? So what reason I say Indonesia, even though Indonesia got hit with a 32% reciprocal tariff, they have a really good political relationship from the new president in Indonesia with the current administration. And same with, you look at Vietnam, really good relationship. Even though they have a 46% reciprocal tariff, it's likely to be nulled down to zero. So we really do have to look beyond price. You have to look at political side as well.
And that's one of the reasons why Central and South America, certain countries in South America, but specifically Central America, has been kind of a hinge pin in nearshoring product for the U.S. market. We saw it first in textiles. And basically, from a textile perspective, Jared, they're primed and ready. The Koreans currently control roughly 80% of the net export for garments within the region, and that's been drastically dropped. The United States has come in with a lot of foreign direct investment, and because China does not have a direct relationship with ambassadorial or any form of consulary relationship with Guatemala, it's been buffered from some of the China Western Hemisphere static that you're getting. So there's a lot of Chinese companies, Korean companies, and Japanese companies, but offshore, bringing product right into Guatemala for manufacture and production to ship into the U.S. market. And they're only 5 days away East Coast, 7 to 10 days away West Coast. So Guatemala has featured really highly in the nearshoring activities of many of the global companies, Nordstrom, Abercrombie, Dillard's, JCPenney, Target. They're all heavily focused in that region, specifically in Guatemala right now.
So, Darin, and this will be the last one, we'll move on. Latin America, Darin owns a factory in Guatemala.
I do, Infotechs.
Yeah. Why Guatemala? And then also some of the neighboring countries, which ones are also potentially good for manufacturers?
Thanks for asking, Jared. We did a 9-nation evaluation back in 2018 to 2019, and we looked at political risk, we looked at currency risk, we looked at crime, we looked at access to labor as well as raw materials. You go through all of these weighted averages, evaluations. Nicaragua actually came out number 1.
No way.
From certain perspective. Yeah, I know. I didn't expect it either. We went to Nicaragua first. We actually put purchase orders into Nicaragua. And then we found them to be quite isolationistic and heavily controlled by government and heavily controlled by the Koreans, interestingly enough. They're really embedded down there. Second on our top 3 list was Guatemala. But before I went to Guatemala, I went to Honduras, which was number 3 on the list, with El Salvador being number 4. Honduras had a really strong set of opportunities there. But you know what? In terms of labor, in terms of equipment, they were focused on commodity items. T-shirts, tank tops, brief shorts, stuff like that, things that were not highly value add up the value chain and complexity for garments. But we found Guatemala to be not only just a T-shirt base that had a lot of fabric, denim suppliers, yarn suppliers, thread suppliers, everything that you want. They also had a lot of equipment in place that would allow us to do highly differentiated, both woven and knitwear. So Guatemala, from a political perspective and financial perspective, their laws are aligned heavily with the United States, trade laws also. And so they featured favorably with us, and that's why we chose to locate in Guatemala.
That's awesome. That's gold. I love hearing just the process that you went through. That's super educational, honestly. Before we pivot to the next one, let's quickly answer Jennifer's question. Jennifer Carter, do you think we are going to start seeing pricing surge from ocean shipments coming out of Southeast Asia, so non-China ports such as Cambodia, Vietnam?
The answer for me is yes. In fact, Dustin has an example of this. The product that was just received or is going to be received at port, I'd received an email just a little bit ago that all of his products going to be relabeled because the cost of his product now is more, landed cost is more than what he had on the tags. Dustin, you've got experience with that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the retailers, they're in a state of uncertainty. And we're all sitting in a state of uncertainty from a manufacturing standpoint. So a practice for retail is oftentimes you pre-label and pre-price your product. Well, we're having requests right now to strip price tags from products because nobody knows what the price needs to be.
How do you see that affecting like third quarter product deliveries or new stock on shelves? How's that happening with big retailers?
Well, if you look at the second biggest retail windfall in the U.S. market, it's back to school. And right now, if we don't put goods on the water within the next 30, 60 days, we're going to have depleted inventory on the shelves during back to school segment. So you want to get your kids some new clothes for school, go now. You're going to see increases. You're going to not see availability.
Well, then what that tells me is that that's a competitive advantage that nearshorers or small people that are pivoting out of the region, if they get product either on the shelves of little boutique stores or get on their website, they're going to be able to fill the gap that big retailers are not going to be able to fill, right? So this is an opportunity for the small manufacturers in the United States and nearshorers.
Also, it's something that I've heard recently is a lot of Luminous customers will, when they purchase from their manufacturers, they'll just have the manufacturer quote DDP. We hear that they won't quote DDP anymore, obviously, but that used to be a very common thing. Just DDP, here's the cost. Yeah. That's not going to happen anymore.
No, we're getting pushback on that too. It's risky when you quote DDP. Dustin, how are you dealing with that? I know how I'm dealing with it. I had to mark it out of my agreements.
Yeah. It's case by case. You have to look at what it is the day you export and how long it's going to take before it comes in. Oftentimes if we have a shift or we have a new add-on, we're going to have a few days. But you just have to put it in and everybody understands and realizes we are not in control of this. And if it happens in the middle of the time frame while we're in motion, that it's an add-on. Or potentially a reduction. We could see some declines in some of those.
That's true. Yeah. So one of the Incoterms that's being used right now is DAP. So you deliver it, but without the duty paid. So you still get the shipping benefits of being able to quote from local along with the garment, but just leaving that duty free and floating. The buyer also doesn't want to get locked into 140% duty if that's going to be reduced.
Right.
Yeah. I see a DAP as an alternative to DDP right now.
I want to use the remaining 20 minutes to get tactical for the small businesses. So,
Sure.
Because you guys brought up a great point. One of my friends who owns an agency around there, a marketing agency, he keeps saying, ops is the new marketing. Supply chain is the new marketing. The people who will win are the ones who get really tactical with their supply chain. You brought up the example of boutique and smaller retailers. Like, they can actually compete now if they can get product. So how can small businesses manage supply chain risk like the big players? Like, what are some things that they can actually do to get product in and compete?
All right. I'm going to throw one unique item out there that you probably never heard about. It's called the Nairobi Protocol. Yes, it is a protocol for adjusting your tariff rate by adjusting your harmonized schedule number, whatever that HTSUS number is. There are unique secrets that are enjoyed by large players on the global field where they know that you can put in a different HTSUS code and drop 2%, 3%, or even zero your duty rate. So we have a medical device manufacturer. That medical device manufacturer said, Darin, I need you to find an alternative to this high duty and high tariff. And I was looking. The fact is, he found it before I did. It's called the Nairobi Protocol, and it's for people that have, or if you're importing devices or supplies that support people that have chronic illness. It's not transitory illness. It's got to be chronic illness. You can bring those articles in, zero duty, zero tariff, and it looks like it's underneath any of the universal tariff. So if you have the right resources, you can find codes that are favorable to the product that you want to bring in and potentially avoid a significant amount of the duty that's going to be levied to us now, or even down to zero. Those are part of the strategies that the big boys use. So it's important to find resources that enable you to identify those paths, such as Ruth with her law firm, and she's in our free packet. She researches these loopholes and provides those to her big clients. So why shouldn't you benefit from those too? That's just one. But one of the other ways is the big guys can't pivot very quickly. The little guys really can pivot quickly. You're not carrying a lot of inventory on the water. You don't have a lot of assets wrapped up in inventory. So your biggest risk is not moving. It's not taking a step in the right direction.
In fact, something that I would say is it's almost like there's never been a better time to disrupt some of the big brands. If you're in the back to school category, there's never been a time where you can actually disrupt that. If you beat them and if you can move faster, you could outprice people. Like, when has that been true over the past decade?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Just actually having something on the shelf has beaten people to the punch. For example, we've got one client who decided 6 months ago he was going to completely move out of China. And he's been working I got permission to use his brands on purpose. And they put together back to school clothing. They put together a lot of different clothing options, but they were so careful about the regions that they chose to manufacture in because they saw the China spillover hitting Vietnam and hitting Southeast Asia, even when I didn't. I'd actually push back against him. And they moved wholesale to launch completely and exclusively out of Central America. The fact is, you can bring a product up online out of Central America right now within 60 days. You can beat the big boys. The big boys take whole seasons, and Dustin knows this. They plan a year in advance, sometimes 2 years in advance, and they're now having to pivot a 2-year elephant or a 1-year elephant off center and move it to another geographic location. It's the nimble that are going to win this battle.
I mean, you're right. The big players, they're starting to work on spring 27. They're just finishing up fall winter 26. That's a long ways off. But I think what it really comes down to is the opportunity to really have this production optionality, right? You have to be agile and you have to know where your secondary location is. And if it's not China, you should know where it is. If your best price is in China, or sometimes you can't replace the capability of these Chinese factories. They're very, very good at what they do. They have decades of experience, and nobody can touch the output or the quality that's put into the products. But there are alternative solutions. So, it's the time for small businesses to be looking at that. But I think if you're buying and then you're reselling, it's time to be looking at, hey, how do I get this so it doesn't, it optimizes and doesn't have these tariffs.
Now, speaking of switching manufacturing and going to
Right.
different countries, are there hidden costs associated with that small businesses miss? So say I'm switching to Guatemala or Mexico. What things do small businesses normally miss when they do that switch?
In my experience in bringing manufacturers over from China to Guatemala, what they miss is unanticipated cost and expense. The unanticipated time costs and going through the sampling process. China, this kind of pivots off what Dustin said. China's fast. We have taught them to be fast. Why? Because we're trying to map out a whole year. We need them to make a decision and solidify all of our samples, fit samples, everything within 14 days. They're perfect at it. They've got the game down. But when you come to Central and South America areas where they have longer lead times, they have institutionalized a slower, longer lead time process. So be aware of the cost of time and make sure that that's on the forefront of any of your discussions. That I need to move in a TIA or a TNA process, I need to move at this pace in order to hit my expectations. If you don't communicate that, they're not breathing it in either. They're not going to know, and everyone's going to be surprised in 3 weeks when nothing's done. So it's not just the Latin environment. It really is our communication and expectations. You can't expect everyone else to jump at the same pace China does. They haven't had the experience.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to transfer our own experience set into our new supplier and vendor, and we communicate clearly. They'll understand what the expectations are, and I guarantee you from my own experience that not only can they rise to the occasion, they can harness local resources at a rate we'll never get to, similar to the way China was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They can get there.
When you look at your relationships with your manufacturers, if you've been in a certain factory for 8 years, 15 years, 20 years, and then you're going to move nations, all that's gone. You start over from square one. You don't have the priorities established. They don't understand your business, your consistency, your stability. So you lose a lot in that relationship capital.
So this is John from JD Customs. He asked,
Hey, John.
Yes, I think he wants some really tactical advice here. Any recommendations for factories in other countries that specialize in CNC manufacturing, aluminum, and titanium automotive products?
Titanium is difficult. You have to put that together in a unique atmosphere-controlled environment. And what was his name? Jonathan?
John. Yeah.
Hey, John. Yeah, you know that takes a particular type of technique and skill. So I know that Mexico has it. I haven't seen it, but I've heard people that have titanium work done down there for aerospace industry and for other industries. In terms of CNC for tooling and EDM tooling processes, every country seems to have its own little hub, or multiple hubs throughout the region. Brazil has a strong industrial base for this. Also, Mexico, of course, does. But the tooling capital of the world is still China, and we are bringing tools in from China into Guatemala to help manufacture our foam products and help manufacture our conceptualized tooling needs. China's we're bringing those all in from China, whether it's for tubing, foam, injection molding. We're still bringing those in from China because we have not found the base that we need in Central America for all of our tooling. They're CNC thin. They're CNC thin there. But I know Indonesia has a strong industrial base for that. Vietnam does as well. So does Thailand. When you look at Indonesia, what, there's 300 million people. I know they're broken out over a lot of islands, but when you look at them being one of the most populous nations in the world, they really have a great resource of labor as well as skilled, educated workers and leaders. They're really capable in Indonesia. I think they're an overlooked region of great resource.
I want you guys to do a little bit of a debate here. How do I create a new supply chain in this new world? And it specifically for importing the components and sub-assemblies into the Western Hemisphere for final assembly. So let's do it like you two work together, and I'll let you guys pick a product. And then I want you guys to show people how you think through what do you buy from here? What do you buy from here? Where do you send the sub assemblies? Where is it getting sent for final assemblies? I want to, you guys pick a product, and I want to see you guys think through this new supply chain problem.
Let's quick do a textile, then we can do an industrial device. Okay. All right. Where's our raw materials going to come from? Are they China based, or can we find? Is it woven? Is it knit? Is it? Let's say it's a hat or glove.
Well, our customer mandates that we source the raw material at the same country of origin. So it has to be from the country we're in. So what country do we want to go?
There's a challenge. Are we going to be limited to China already because it's some sort of filament? Or do we have access to a cotton base and we can do it out of India? India, Indonesia, Malaysia? Okay, let's go cotton glove. And let's go cotton hat. We can do those out of India. We can do those out of Indonesia and Malaysia really quick. They have cotton there. Or Bangladesh, right? All right. Then in terms...
If we looked at the variability in the labor rates in those nations, we're probably best off looking at Bangladesh, because we can also pull resources from India and look at the investment that's been going into Bangladesh on the backside of the mills.
That's right. So raw materials out of the region. If you go labor, you're going to find yourself in Bangladesh or India, and I agree with that. Those are the two countries we would focus on if we were working on gloves or maybe even or certain types of hats. Now, if it's a mechanical device, where would we go first? Digital-driven mechanical device.
Thailand has a really heavy automotive industry. There's been a lot of manufacturing there on the automotive side. So the labor force is trained. So if you were to set up a new facility or just look for products, you're going to get a highly trained workforce.
And in fact, Thailand, if we're looking automotive, let's switch to tires. If you're going to look for tires, you're going to look in Vietnam, you're going to look in Thailand, you're going to look in Malaysia. They have a lot of raw rubber supply, so your raw materials are going to be there. You're forming the industrial base, infrastructure is all there, and you also have 20 to 30 years, decades worth of experience within that particular industry. That would bleed over into windshield wipers. It would bleed over into seals. It would bleed over into any number of automotive items, just like you said, Dustin. So you've got raw materials there, and you also have labor within that region. You probably could choose Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. Any one of those could be interchangeable, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, when you get down to the labor rates, but also the workforce and the education that comes behind them, and you got to look at which ones have the culture for wanting to get the job done. You look at two cultures between Vietnam and Indonesia. A lot of people would rather work with Vietnam than Indonesia.
Yes.
And it really just comes down to that the Vietnamese will listen to and do what they're told. The Indonesians go, oh, I heard that, and then they'll kind of meander off and do something the way that they think it should be done, or take a break. So but that affects the net result of the supply outcome and the efficiencies.
Next question would be, okay, so we want to have something that's cotton. We want to have it near hemisphere because what we want to do is avoid any of the existential crises that could come from political fallout, monetary risk, trade agreement mistakes that aren't proven trade agreements. So then you would end up reclassifying your source and origin to be Central and South America, especially if they want to have quicker turns and they don't want to have exposure to inventory. Those sorts of questions from an executive and a managerial level help narrow down your field, but you're not going to find tires built or automotive stuff built in Central America. You're going to find it in Mexico. So it really is, what's your category of product? What are your raw materials for that product? And where do you have the right infrastructure and factors of labor readily access to you? There's a hierarchy of questions, and Dustin and I go through these questions and these exercises quite regularly.
That was really cool, by the way. Like, to see how you guys think through or like go through that hierarchy of questions. That was interesting. Because I think most people watching are probably just like, where else can I get my product? And it's like, is it in Indonesia? Is it here? And you guys go through a whole different hierarchy of it. It's not necessarily, can you get something here? It's like, what are the raw materials? What's the labor market? Political risk? All of those things. That was cool. Any final things that you two want to discuss, Dustin and Darin?
I would just paint a word picture. If you think about sourcing right now, it's like sitting on a boat and playing chess in a storm, right? You're not just thinking about 5 moves ahead on your chessboard, but the next wave is going to hit the boat and clear the board off. So we can take all the time we want to strategize and ponder and discuss where we're going, but we don't know the next moves that are going to hit us, that next wave. So it's an uncertain time, but we have to be strategic, and you've got to be planning and got to be looking at your pivots and watching your numbers.
where can we find you? So let's start with you, Dustin, then come to Darin, and then myself.
You could find me on LinkedIn or makotoco.com. We're readily available to help pivot, make a change, make a shift, look at your product, make an analysis, help you be retail ready. We design, develop, and deliver. At the end of the day, that's our motto. It's underneath what we do, and we're here to serve.
And Dustin has deep experience in pricing models to get into. I manufacture, and one of the amazing things that Dustin brought to me once, do you know how to price your product to go into retail? No, I've never needed to do that. Everyone just says, Darin, go make this thing, and I make it and turn it over to them, and it comes at the right time, the right rate, everything is right. But I don't ever know how to get it into retail. This man is an absolute wizard at that. Now, for me, it's iascm.com. or jdlong at iascm.com is my email address. You can find me on Darin Long on LinkedIn, and that's where a lot of folks maybe here or another podcast have connected with me. That's my primary mode or reach out from social media. If you're looking for information on Western Hemisphere or anywhere in Southeast Asia, and you got problems moving supply chain, I think right now we're towing about 14 companies in regional transition right now. And we have a deep experience in it. I've built, turned over, and operated companies, supply chains, manufacturing sources. Between myself, Dustin, and our other network, who may come on at a later date for here, you're going to see a global view with local focus and the ability to execute on the granular. We enjoy our job. You can see we thrive on this. We enjoy who we work with, and we never work with factories that cheat us once. They don't have a second chance. Thanks for having us, Jay.
Yeah, guys, that was awesome.
Dustin.
There was one last question that came in.
One
Let's
more.
see if we can do
Bring
this
it.
in 45 seconds. Thoughts on paper products and production of premium packaging have been in China for many years. Should we stay the course or move? This is straightupgrowth.com. Straightupgrowth.com. Mark Anderson.
Paper products. We do a lot of packaging and paper products, and I've consulted with 2 other companies other than yourself. Paper pulp and the move from a paper pulp, your origination from China and paper pulps, they buy scrap pulp and they buy scrap paper from all over the globe. The challenge with that is finding a new location that's going to have access to that pulp and be able to convert it into your quality of paper. Reach out to me. I've got some documents for this that might be able to help.
Awesome,
Thanks,
guys. Signing out. Bye.
Hey, hang loose.